My name is Kevin Conway. I am a Principal Program Analyst in Mathematica's Data Analytics Division. I am also very pleased and honored to lead our Veteran Policy area internally. I want to thank you all for joining today at this Mathematica Speaker Series event, which is being held obviously in our DC location. But I also want to say thanks and extend my appreciation for all of our colleagues that are attending in our 5 other offices across the country. Thank you and welcome. As you know, Mathematica's work on veterans issues spans virtually our entire traditional topic areas. And we're making important contributions and difference in the health and well-being, as well as the training and employment of our nation's veterans and the policies and programs that support them. Today, I am very pleased to introduce 2 partners in that work who are helping to facilitate decision-making, evidence-based decision-making on veterans issues through the sponsorship of rigorous and relevant research that can help improve outcomes for this very important population. Ron Lazier is the Director of Policy at the Department of Veteran Affairs Office of Policy and Planning. Ron and his colleague Nathan Williamson will be discussing today how the VA has begun to foster research partnerships with veteran stakeholders to address issues of strategic importance affecting veterans as well as their families. They will also describe the current policy research priorities at the VA and areas where academics, practitioners, research organizations like ours, and policymakers can collaborate to build the evidence needed in each of these policy areas. With that, I am very pleased to invite Ron to the podium. And Ron, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Kevin, thank you for those very kind words. It's an honor and privilege to be here with and all of you today. But before we begin, I want to thank everyone in the room as well as everyone that is calling in for the work that Mathematica does across all sectors and boundaries to help improve the effectiveness of policy and programs, and also to help improve well-being, not only for veterans and their families, but for society as a whole. And Nathan and I actually work in an office which has been deemed VA strategic think tank for the department. And in these roles, we're responsible for ensuring integration, collaboration, and most importantly, cooperation among all of VA's administrations and staff offices as it relates to policy, strategy, planning, management, and governance. So today we're going to touch on 3 key areas, as Kevin mentioned. I'm going to provide you with some background information about the department and our work and as relates to veterans and families, as well as some key statistics about the veteran population. Nathan is going to touch on our Veteran Policy Field of Study initiative and highlight that through some case study examples, as well as discuss some next steps. But before I talk about the data, I want to provide you with some background and info about the department's veteran population projection model, because this model is the source of all the statistics that I'm going to talk about later on in our presentation. So the VetPop 2014, as we like to call it, is the latest veteran population projection model developed by VA's Office of the Chief Actuary, which is located within VA's Office of Policy and Planning. And to provide you with some key highlights, the VetPop 2014 is a bottom-up model which projects veteran populations at the county level as a starting point and aggregates to the state, national, and other areas. Second, the VetPop model uses both veteran record-level data and survey data from a wide variety of sources, such as VA, the Department of Defense, the Census Bureau, the IRS, and as you all probably know, the Social Security Administration as well. And lastly, VetPop consists of 3 major modules, with the first being the military separation model, the second being the mortality model, and the last model being the migration model. And if you look at the graphic at the bottom of this slide, we like to call that our veteran model diagram, which highlights all of the work and and the thinking that goes into the VETPOP model. So VETPOP serves a purpose internally and externally for the department. The internal purpose is it helps inform VA's budget decisions, resource allocation, strategic planning, policy analysis, outreach efforts, knowing where veterans are, as well as risk management. And it also serves an external purpose. For example, Congress uses the VETPOP model to find out how many veterans are in their congressional districts. Other agencies uses this model to obtain demographic data for their planning and policy analysis. So some of the other agencies that you've worked with, some of their budgeting decisions, planning and policy decisions might be based off of the VETPOP projections produced by the Department of Veteran Affairs. State governments also use the projections of the veteran population and demographic data for budget and allocating resources and for providing various services. And businesses and researchers also use this model to conduct research and plan urban and rural studies. And lastly, we get a lot of inquiries from Congress, the public, and news media on a number of characteristics of veterans living in particular states, counties, and congressional districts. And the VETPOP model and the data that it produces helps us answer these questions in a timely manner. And if you want more info on VETPOP, we can provide you with some contacts, or you can shoot an email to va.ncvas@va.gov, which is the central address for VA's National Statistics for Veteran Analysis. This slide we have up here and highlights the veteran population. And to show you the veteran population numbers here are based on the veterans that are eligible for VA benefits. So under in Title 38, a veteran is defined to mean a person who has served in the active military, naval, or Air Force, and who has been discharged or released therefrom under conditions other than dishonorable service. And as you see, we have 21.6 million veterans in the US, 9% of which are women veterans. And we have 46% of those veterans are over the age of 65, and we have 5% under the age of 30. Now we talked about the veteran population. Now I want to delve into the department itself. Everything we do at the department is driven by our mission, values, and characteristics. With our mission being defined by former President Lincoln, which is to care for him whom have borne the battle and for his widow and his orphan. I also want to highlight everything we do is driven by our core values and characteristics. And these values define who we are and also how we're different from other organizations and reflect how VA employees care for veterans, their families, and beneficiaries. And our 5 core values spell out I CARE, and those values are, as you see here, integrity, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence. And the I CARE represents the common view of VA's existing culture and what the workforce believes what VA should look like in the future. And these core values and characteristics are enduring. So no matter who sits in leadership positions at the department and which employees may leave and come back, these core values are something that we believe are enduring, and it drives the services, benefit services, but also the analytic support that we provide to help improve the conditions for veterans and their families. This graphic here highlights that we have approximately over 1,500 VA facilities across the US and in the Philippines. And this further highlights the scope of the VA's work, the VA's footprint. And as you can see here from this slide, VA not only touches programs, but we also touch communities. I mean, and as you can see here, we have over 820 community-based outpatient clinics throughout the US, 300 vet centers, 150 medical centers, and 131 national cemeteries. So I mentioned earlier that we have about 22 million veterans, but only about 900 million access VA's healthcare. And that's for a variety of reasons. For example, and based on eligibility rules, some veterans aren't eligible to enroll in healthcare. Some make personal choices not to. But there's a multitude of reasons why. But VA currently serves about 9 million veterans. And to also highlight another figure here too, if you look at the part that says VA education beneficiaries, right now we're providing education benefits to over 1 million veterans. We suspect that that number has actually risen. As you can see, our data is as of FY13, but veterans can use their benefits at various times. So someone may use their benefits for a year, go on and do something else, and come back and use them again. So earlier on, I touched on what we do within the Office of Policy and Planning, but the office as a whole serves as the principal advisor to VA leadership, to secretary, undersecretaries, and key officials with regards to all issues related to policy and strategy throughout the department. And as part of that role, we conduct work related to veteran policy research and analysis in 4 key areas. The first being the Institute of Medicine Task Force. So the department has a process for determining whether or not to grant presumptions on certain service-connected disabilities. And we manage that process from a policy standpoint. But it's a collaborative process that is done with the Department of, done with our Veterans Benefits Administration, the Veterans Health Administration, where most of the work gets done, as well as VA's various staff offices, such as the Office of General Counsel, Office of Congressional Relations. But the point I want to make is that this is a collaborative process that helps the department make decisions on issues such as TBI, PTSD, and other issues as well. Second, we also have a lead role in VA's legislative review process. Third, one thing we did recently was work collaboratively throughout the department for the first time to develop a process and policy for how you conduct productive and responsible public-private partnerships for the department. And that's something we've seen play out today with the standing up of VA's Office of Strategic Partnerships, which is under the Secretary's MyVA initiative. And lastly, which Nathan will talk about next, is how we stood up our Veteran Policy Research Program, which he manages for us today. So with that said, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Nathan Williamson.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nathan Williamson. As Ron and Kevin had mentioned, I work in the Office of Policy and Planning. It really is an honor to be here with you all, Mathematica, today, and for everybody that's calling in across the country, appreciate your time. It's important because of something Kevin had mentioned, and that's the veterans issues really do touch all the topic areas that you all deal with in Mathematica, and that's why we want to talk about the veteran policy field of study, is to sort of get the word out there and use some of our core values and characteristics, especially advocacy, to get out into the public sphere and let everybody know that veterans issues are not just VA issues. They really do transcend societal issues. And it's not just VA's role, the Department of Defense's role, or even organizations like Mathematica's role to do this in a singular, in a siloed fashion, but we all have to work together in a community. I am appreciative of the work that you all do, even if you don't work directly with VA, because at some point down the line you are dealing with veterans. I come from a veteran family. I'm a veteran myself. My brother, my father's a veteran. And like 1/3 of the 360,000 employees at VA, we are our own customer because most of us are veterans or part of a veteran family. So the work we do, we take very serious, and we understand that other organizations take the work serious as well. With that said, I do want to get into the veteran policy field of study. It's a novel idea, something that sort of came together. A bunch of stakeholders over the years got together, started talking about their own special niches. You have research institutes in academia starting to focus on veterans with increased intensity after September 11th. You have a lot of returning veterans going into academia as students, so you have them going in and bringing their veteran perspective into the classroom with their fellow students. You also have your professors and your advocacy groups and your nonprofit organizations that want to help veterans who may be struggling and not be able to get to a point of successful transition or just be in a successful position in their local civilian communities. So the Veteran Policy Field of Study is really trying to look at how all of these different organizations, these groups, these interests can work together from a strategic perspective, not led or directed by VA, but having VA being an equal stakeholder in the larger veteran community. We call it a policy field of study because it's no surprise that the Department of Veterans Affairs is a leader in veteran health research. The Office of Research and Development, its roots began in the 1920s when VA, which was back then the Veterans Administration, launched a series of health studies to combat malaria. That grows down today to a close to $3 billion research budget per year. Of that, probably $800 million is appropriated through VA funding. The rest is through foundation relationships, grants from or funding from other government agencies. So the healthcare research done at VA is bar none ahead of the curve and has done great things not only for veterans but the general United States population. The Veterans Policy Field of Study is really, like I said, a community of support for veterans, and it's not just the veteran community. There's this misconception that veterans sort of scatter and stay within their own communities, but veterans are all over the place. In fact, veterans are projected by VetPop 2014 to be in every one of America's counties except one. And this one county is a little enclave on the North Island in Hawaii somewhere that has a population of 50 people. And I guarantee you that there is some veteran who was a submariner somewhere in World War II living on the beach having pina coladas. But the issue here is that the veterans are part of a community of support. There are federal partners. VA is a leader. We have Title 38. We own an entire section of the United States Code for veterans' pensions and benefits. But go look through the U.S. Code. There are other areas. The Department of Defense has Transition Assistance Program, which is led by the Department of Labor. That is an employment initiative. Transition transcends employment. You have the Department of Education who works with VA to ensure that the GI Bill benefits are being used in an appropriate manner and that the universities that veterans spend and use their hard-earned benefits are not taking advantage of them. So there are many stakeholders in government. Each of the 50 states and the territories have their own Department of Veterans Affairs. As Ron mentioned earlier, we have facilities in the Philippines, so it's an international effort. The veteran community is no longer being treated by researchers as just a United States issue. VA in Canada, they have their own Department of Veterans Affairs, a minister level. They are leading research in Canada. They have a collaboration of about 38 universities who work together on Canadian veteran issues. And the Veteran Policy Field of Study in practice, in theory, is the end state for the United States to work with this international research community and other stakeholders on issues of policy. Academic institutions, VSOs, your veteran service organizations. The American Legion is no longer just your grandfather sitting down telling war stories. You have newer and younger veteran service organizations. You have younger veterans from the 9/11 generation, my generation of veterans who are going out there and engaging with some of your older generation of veterans. Ron mentioned earlier some of our population, 857,000 World War II veterans in the United States. This year is the first year that is projected that our World War II veterans is below 1 million. Think about that for a minute, because that's been our generation of veterans. The mindset, the conception of veterans has been your World War II, your Korean, your Vietnam veterans. Your Gulf War era veterans, which goes back from 1990 through today, now exceeds in numbers with 7 million the veterans that were in Vietnam, which, as Ron mentioned earlier, was just under 7 million. And again, go back to the age. Think of the perceptions people have when they're developing policies, when they're making those funding decisions at their own organizations or trying to get grants to maybe do a research project. Veterans are not all like me, they're not all under 30. In fact, 5% are post 9/11 veterans under the age of 30. Over 65% of veterans are still going into retirement or are already retired, so you have the aging perspective. So veterans issues are not just issues that affect the perception of veterans, they transcend society's issues again. And the community is really helpful in bringing that attention to focus when people are making policy decisions that fund or make decisions for funding or decisions to have programs. The connection between programs, the reason we have benefits. Mathematica is very involved in Social Security Administration's Disability Research Consortium. They're looking at it, again, at a perspective from VA that we lead the disability compensation for veterans. Social Security is one of the federal government's largest disability compensation programs. GAO has highlighted both programs in their high risk list. We want to look at this again, not just from the program perspective, but how do these two interact? And that's when you take the 30,000-foot approach and look at it from policy. We're more than Title 38. We're more than Social Security Administration. We are two programs that meet basically the same client and same customer at some point. What are we doing strategic and policy-wise to make those decisions? And we can't make those decisions without the proper research to back them up. The community brings those perspectives. They ensure a level of relevance and quality to the work. Everybody uses the term evidence-based policy. What exactly does that mean? What is your evidence? Are you trying to have evidence to support the program that you want to have? Or are you doing evidence to do what's right for the veteran family? Very difficult questions to ask, but those are questions we need to ask at the strategic level to make sure we are all working together in a collaborative way. So here's the deal, the Veterans Policy Field of Study. Again, I am not purposely defining it because it is abstract. We are not here to own the Veterans Policy Field of Study. We are here to advocate for it. It is a group effort. It is a United States, it is an international effort to get people who really want to do help for the veteran and their families and the communities that our veteran and families live in to do good for them and also for the communities as well. Used to be research was done sort of siloed. If you were interested in homelessness issues, you would do your homelessness issues. If you were interested in some benefits for veterans, you might look at some of how that interacts with their family members. Healthcare, again, VHA is established. VHA and Veterans Healthcare, they have academic affiliation. There are 19 centers of excellence. People are familiar with the Department of Defense Centers of Excellence. VA has centers of excellence as well. The interaction between those and healthcare, fantastic. But again, policy from the strategic level is more than just healthcare, and we need to get the stakeholders involved in it. And also we need to sort of build the next generation of leaders, public administrators, policymakers, to understand that 22 million veterans today, the population projection going down to 14 million veterans, but as that veteran population ages, it's going to be more in healthcare costs, it's going to be more in costs for other things, and how does that involve in your policy and budget decisions? We really had no consensus. When we were talking veteran policy, it was ad hoc, it was sort of based on whatever your program, what you were trying to do, what fit your needs. That was across the board. When people talk about a veteran, what is the veteran? Is it what Title 38 says it is? Or do researchers who are looking more for social and society issues want to look at the person who served? Now, these are questions that I cannot advocate for or against in the Department of Veterans Affairs, but researchers are looking at it from a societal impact issue. And does somebody who served, are they a veteran for their particular research project? Fine, but understand that there are certain limitations for the definition of veteran for access to service and benefits by the federal government. We at VA, we really didn't have a mechanism to go out and communicate this to the research community, and that can cause conflict sometimes. What do you mean someone's not a veteran? What's a veteran family? Is it just a spouse? Is it the dependent? Different legislation have changed the definition of family very rapidly in the United States here in the last few years. VA has been ahead of the curve in accepting those definitions and changes of the veteran family. But veterans self-identify family beyond their husband or wife or children. The family is that group of support that is most likely to be closest to them. It could be grandparents, it could be their neighbor. As long as the veteran defines them as a family, the research community needs to consider the definition of a veteran family. So where we want to go, basically we just want everybody to work together and not duplicate. It's a cost savings issue, and quite frankly, it's an issue of providing the best support to the veteran and their family. There was an estimate out of the Urban Institute that there were close to 41,000 nonprofit organizations serving veterans in the military. How do you as a veteran who may be a 23-year-old E4 out of high school, left, going to college, know how those 41,000 organizations are going to help you navigate your transition? You really don't, and it's up to the research community and the policy community to come together and help the veteran, give them the tools that they can navigate and feel comfortable to make those decisions on himself or herself. So the veteran policy field of study is to bring together this independent group of thought, multidisciplinary, not just healthcare, not just education, and do some research and analysis and really drive a robust national dialogue. You really want a framework. You don't want to give people instructions on what to do at a certain point, but without a conceptual framework of what it means to go from a service member status to a veteran status, you have nothing that can guide those strategic and policy decisions. So what are we doing at VA? We can say stuff like that and just walk away and leave it to the group. So under Ron's leadership and VA and Office of Policy and Planning really took a very courageous step. It's something that's not done in VA outside of the research community, and developed a veterans policy research agenda. Now this agenda is, I'll go into methodology in a second, but the purposes are really to communicate what we as the Department of Veterans Affairs and the community that supports veterans across the nation feel are priorities for policy that we need research to support those decisions. We want to support the research outside of VA. We want the undergrad student to maybe do a paper on a veteran issue. We want the person who's going for their MPA to discuss a policy on veterans, and we're starting to see that. We want to foster collaboration. Events like this today, Mathematica does great work out in the veteran community, whether you work with VA directly or not. You want to foster those collaborative relationships because we are working towards the same end state. And you want to produce and disseminate research because at the end of the day, the guy who cuts the check wants to see the results, the evidence to support those decisions. So the methodology behind what we've developed before we get into the priority areas that we've identified is basically a mixture of an environmental scan, which is continuously done part of our quadrennial strategic planning process. So it not only informs our long-term strategic goals as a department, but also the immediate and near-term research priorities which are captured in this agenda. But it also allows us a discussion point to go out into the community and sort of get the people who are out there on the front lines, on the ground level, doing the work with veterans and their families. What are you seeing? What are we seeing nationally? What are we seeing in your local communities? What can we do? What do we need to know to do what we need to do? And the agenda really picks these areas, and we do an in-house analysis. We brainstorm, we do group thought, we go out into the community, and we engage in groups like you. By the way, if you have any ideas for our agenda, please speak up at the end of this thing. But the policy agenda is to help guide us all who are all over the place to get back on that strategic line, the veteran and their family. So online, va.gov/op3, go to the Office of Policy link and you will find a copy of our agenda. We can share it with you personally. I can get Kevin the PDF. We have 4 priority research areas, and this is, again, useful for everybody, to the private citizen who wants to start a nonprofit or a group, all the way up to the Secretary of Veterans Affairs. These are priorities that we in VA see as a need for the policy research community to engage and collaborate on. Reintegration, also known as military to civilian transition. We're talking about the transition from taking the uniform, taking it off, hanging it up in your closet, and going into your civilian communities for the rest of your life. That is a huge transition point. There's transition theory, there's a bulk of research out there on transitions. The military to civilian transition, I mean, you can go into identity research. There's so many different areas that researchers are focused on that can be helpful. Veterans, families, and children. We purposely called out children with the veteran family for two reasons in the agenda. And one is there's not that much known about the dependent of a service member once they get their 214 and go out into their civilian communities. The Department of Defense, they have their annual report on the demographics of the military family, but what happened when that uniform comes off? These are areas that we need to know to make those policy decisions. Public-private partnerships. VA last year signed a policy directive highlighting the importance of public-private partnerships. It's a first step in a recognition that VA is part of a veteran community and that we will work together in any collaborative way to make sure that we are helping veterans. And as I mentioned earlier, veteran benefit and disability compensation. This is a high-risk area as defined by GAO, and rightfully so. There is a lot of funding and a lot of things that we don't know about the relationship. The definition of being disabled changes, and how does policy keep up with those changing conceptions? So the agenda is a living document. We personally use it to engage out with the community, and we wanted to provide a case study example on how we do that. Last year, we hosted a forum on veteran and family reintegration. It initially started out to be a forum on reintegration itself. We wanted to get the Department of Defense, the Department of Labor together and talk about basically the TAP stuff. But again, TAP is very employment focused, and we're again up here 30,000 feet. Employment is part of this. It is a piece of transition. So let's get more involved. And as we were engaging and doing our environmental scanning and working with organizations, people kept asking about the veteran family. So we saw an opportunity to bring and connect the veteran family and ask the question, what happens not only to the veteran as they transition, what happens to their family? What does the family provide to help enable that veteran successful transition? These are all areas that we need to know to have concrete strategic policy and guidance around transition. You're talking about bringing multiple government agencies, organizations, potentially hundreds of millions of dollars of funding on one particular topic, and we really don't know much about one of the biggest stakeholders involved, and that's the family member. So what we did was we hosted a group leader. It was made up more of non-government folks and government folks, which again is a very courageous thing for VA and the Office of Policy and Planning to do. More than 30 participants, including people from within VA, the business lines. We wanted to make sure VA and their thoughts were represented because they are on the ground to discuss this area of transition, the veteran family. And people, again, approached it from their own little niche, their point of view. Transition is about getting a college degree and moving on and getting a job. No, transition is about you're a 35-year-old veteran. You don't want to go to college and be an undergrad. You want to go and get a job and support your family. Again, 30,000 feet. Do you need this? Do you need that? How does this interact with this? These are all questions we all need to think about. You can't just go out there and start doing stuff willy-nilly. And a full day discussion, arguments, fighting and hugs. People came together and decided we do need a framework, something to guide us to understand what is transition. And the best way to do that is a conceptual framework. There's a debate on if there's a theoretical framework or a conceptual framework which can guide policy. A framework can do both. You can have a framework to help people who are developing theory for research, but policymakers need that framework to be able to start understanding how things line up and go along the path that the veteran family takes. Again, we mentioned earlier all the programs out there to support the veteran and their family. What are they? How do veterans know which one are reliable? Which ones are actually involved in transition, or which ones are involved in pre-separation? Which ones are involved when a veteran is going in and needing home health care when they're in their 80s? These are things that we just need everybody to understand and know. So an inventory of programs, services, even the partnerships. A lot of the people in the room knew other people that were working together, and people who work in the veteran community realize really quick it's a small community. Everybody knows everybody. You see the same faces at the same conferences all the time. That gets old. So let's develop some of these new partnerships. What partnerships outside the veteran community do you have in areas of homelessness or other areas? Also, data gaps. Again, the veteran family is a data gap for researchers right now. There was a lot of research done on the military family, but when that uniform comes off, what happens to that family? Is it the case that the family member, the dependent, is now the primary income provider for that family as a veteran transitions? Or is the veteran able to help and support that family member? In emerging areas of research, for example, since September 11th, the National Guard and Reserve components have been deployed at a level that has basically never been seen before. These veterans are veterans. If you ask another veteran who ever served in Iraq or Afghanistan, one day they were over there, they're a veteran. But again, what do we know about what happens to them? Because they don't go back to their Fort Dix or their Fort Bliss when they return. They don't go back to a unit that will have the resources readily available. They go back to their communities. Citizen soldier, what happens when they go back to that community? What issues that normal veterans face when they go into a civilian community? We need to know those pieces of information. So basically, we took that forum and we started engaging with other stakeholders, and it has taken off like wildfire. It has developed into an international thought. I know the international community through organizations like NATO, other governments like in Canada are looking at transition very seriously to develop their own policies, and they are on the forefront of academic research. Their research is going to inform some of the evidence base that will be available here in the United States. But more importantly, if you ask those researchers in other countries, 99% of the research available to them to make their decision is based off of US veterans. So we are not only informing these policy decisions here in the United States, it really is an international community of support. And with that said, the international community of support has the same issues that we face here in the United States, albeit on a smaller scale. The veteran and the family, start thinking of ideas, look at our agenda, look at the reintegration in veteran and family research areas as potential areas to guide research. You don't have to do research specifically on the veteran, but make the veteran a key demographic that you want to look out to. Data gaps, again, the veteran family, what are the components of reintegration? What are these little areas that contribute to successful reintegration? What is successful reintegration? Would you ask me if I'm successfully reintegrated? The answer is yes. Would you ask me that 2 years ago? Probably not. So those are the things you need to realize that in a framework, it is sort of a timeline, and the veteran ultimately decides the success for his or her own reintegration. And that is something that we kind of take for granted, like, oh, how is this program not working for them? It's perfect. We'll talk to the veteran, find out from them. And we do want to close the presentation portion of this engagement. Just a reiteration, and I again love what Kevin said at the beginning, because it is true, veterans' issues are society's issues. Today's the 15th, was the day that Abraham Lincoln passed away in 1865. A few weeks before he was assassinated, he gave his second inaugural address, which leads to the motto that VA uses, our mission, to care for him who shall have borne a battle and for his widow and his orphan. But take a step back and read that whole final sentence for a moment, because you can see that that was a piece of one broader sentence. There was a political reason for what Abraham Lincoln was saying here, but it is timely to today, because charity for all, achieve and cherish a just and lasting peace, ourselves, all nations. These are big words, and a reminder that veterans' issues are society's issues. And with that, we are concluding our presentation and look forward to further discussion with you all.